Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the risk of having my wrist slapped for starting 30 seconds early, I will go for it. Anyway, good evening. My name's Ian Edwards. I'm councillor and I am chairman of the Central and South Planning Committee. Just a couple of announcements before we get going. Firstly, a very warm welcome to you all, members of the public that have attended, and also to anybody who may be following us online. The meetings are videoed and they are available on YouTube. The little black dome to the front of you is a camera facing this way, okay? And it captures it all forever. So you're forever in the ether on this one, and you can view the meeting at your own convenience. But others do follow us, and very good evening to you. Members of the public in the public section there, the cameras are facing this way. You only come onto screen when you are speaking as a petitioner. But there's nothing to fear about. Anyway, the meeting will be following the agenda as published in the papers. They should be available for you, as should be feedback forms, which we do encourage you to complete. That does help our democratic services improve the service that we provide and make sure that our meetings are properly accessible to everybody. Now, with regards to a fire alarm, one isn't expected this evening, so if it does sound, we will be evacuating immediately. The best way out is the way you came in, which is out the double doors and back round the corner and through to the main reception. If that is problematic for any reason, we will take you out via our car park way quite easily. So don't worry. There is also an alternative fire exit behind here, should that one be blocked for whatever reason. As I say, no need to panic because we will all be leaving together and we will clearly show you the way. Can I ask, please, mobile devices are turned off, mine included. Thank you. And I'll just talk a little bit about who's around the table, how the meeting is run. Forgive me. A lot of people around the table. The committee itself are made up of the councillors, and they are down each side of the table here. They're the voting members, and they're the ones that consider the applications and make decisions on it. Let me introduce them to you, and I'll start on my far left-hand side, Councillor Money, Councillor Morse, Councillor Kashid, and on my far right-hand side, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Chamdow, Councillor Ahmed Walana, and Councillor Yarrow. I, as chairman, will only vote should there be a tie. Okay, so my job's slightly different. We're assisted by a number of officers. Rosen Hogan is our legal officer and gives us legal advice. And Neil, what's your surname? Fraser. Forget the surname. Neil Fraser, Democratic Services, and keeps minutes and keeps the online. James Rogers, Head of Planning, gives us expert planning advice. Meg Harani will be presenting each of the applications, and Alan Tilley is our transport advisor and gives us advice on transport matters. We start with a presentation of the issues. At the petition time, you come forward and I will talk you through giving petitions. However, this is not a public meeting, although we're meeting in public, and therefore the speaking rights are clearly controlled and confined by the Council's constitution. 5 minutes speaking time for those presenting a petition and speaking rights for the applicant or agent in response. So anybody else who wishes to speak from the gallery, I'm sorry, we can't allow it. And I do have to be quite tight on the timing to be fair to everybody. So that's the meeting. We dance through a few bits of process at the outset, but they are literally a very few parts. It will only take a couple of seconds before we get into the business proper. So let me start with agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
Apologies received from Councillor Bryanstead.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest, matters coming before the committee tonight. Any at all, colleagues? No, thank you. Number 3, sign and receive minutes of the meeting of the 30th of August. Great. Thank you very much. And now, 4 matters, no matters have been notified in advance or urgent. And item 5, getting through this so quickly, is to confirm that everything's in part 1. And I don't need to say any more because we'll just leave it at that. It's all in public. So we're now into item 6. And I think we slowed down a bit now. Land at Sandow Crescent, please. Mr. Harani.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to a site comprising land located to the rear of properties fronting Sandow Crescent and Nestles Avenue, which is currently occupied by a yard with rows of garages and single-storey buildings used for light industrial or office purposes. Some of the garages are currently used by local residents for parking. The proposal is for the erection of 7 two-storey, 3-bedroom dwellings. The application is the subject of 11 letters and a petition, and the details of the consultation replies are set out on pages 14 to 16 of the agenda and on the addendum sheet. The main issues for members to consider are the principle of the development, highways and parking issues, and the quality of the accommodation provided. In terms of the principle of the development, the site is within the Hayes housing zone, where planning policies seek to maximise the increase in housing provision due to its highly accessible location. The site is irregular in shape, which has resulted in a heavily constrained development in order to avoid neighbour impacts, such that the density of the development falls below the minimum density of 50 units per hectare recommended for a suburban area in the London Plan. Thus, serious concerns are raised that such a site should come forward in a housing zone with density which is below the minimum recommended in the London Plan. It's obvious that further land assembly of surrounding land could overcome all the above concerns and result in a more acceptable development proposal. Furthermore, the isolated development of this site could also prejudice any wider land assembly or release of land for housing. Development is therefore also considered to be contrary to policy B14 of the London Plan, as well as policy B14 of the local plan and 3.4 of the London Plan. In terms of highways and parking, it's accepted that the traffic levels generated by the proposed development are unlikely to be very different to the existing use of the site. The main concern, therefore, is the inadequacy of the access to the site. The access road is around 30 metres long and is only 3.1 metres wide at its narrowest point. This would not allow room for 2 cars to pass, no room for a footway, and insufficient width for larger vehicles, including fire engines and refuse trucks. The access road would have very sharp corners at both ends, which would result in poor visibility when moving in and out of the site. The turning circle into the site would also be reduced by the parking of residents' cars on the left-hand side of Sandow Crescent. Council's highway officer is not satisfied with the poor access to the site, particularly for a development of this size. It's considered that a new development should not fail to provide the necessary fire engine access, and that a development of this scale should not rely on sprinkler systems. Guidance provided by the London Fire Brigade requires a minimum width of 3.7 metres for the access to the site, as well as adequate sweep circles and turning circles. It's not considered that there's sufficient room to provide these in this location within this site, and the proposal is considered unacceptable for this reason. In terms of the quality of the accommodation provided, Policy 3.5 of the London Plan and the Technical Housing Nationally Described Space Standards set out the requirement for internal floor areas for new dwellings. The proposal is for 2-storey, 3-bedroom, 5-person dwellings, which under the standards require a minimum internal floor area of 93 square metres. The proposed dwellings have an internal floor area of 87 square metres, which falls below the minimum standards required, and the proposal is thus considered unacceptable for this reason also. In conclusion, whilst the proposal is not considered to impact on the residential amenities of nearby properties and would comply with council requirements in terms of the provision of amenity space, it's considered to be piecemeal development which is unacceptable in principle. The proposal also fails to provide an acceptable access to the site, and the size of the dwellings falls short of the required standard. The application is thus overall recommended for refusal. If I can just go through the plans. Shows the site. These are the proposed ground floor plans.
He's working behind us as well. It's a novelty.
And the site layout, as members can see, because of the shape of the site, if I can find my... Oh well, never mind. Because of the shape of the site, the development is constrained virtually to the centre of the site, because in order to meet the requirements of 21 metre distances and 15 metre distances, this results in there being insufficient room for turning circles and whatever within the site. which has led to the issues relating to the fire engine and turning circles for refuse trucks. The first floor plans, again the site layout, the roof plans. These are the design of the buildings, no issues with the design. And then you can see the constraints, the narrow access. Then this is the photographs of the site itself. It is being utilised at present, fairly low key uses, but sort of light industrial office type uses. So again, these are just photographs within the site, the surrounding properties. And that shows the access and its width. If I can just bring members' attention to the addendum sheet. We had 3 additional responses from residents in Sandow Crescent and Nestles Avenue. These responses do not raise additional issues which are not covered in the main report. The applicants have attempted to address the reason for refusal and make following statements on the particular reasons. They say that in relation to reason 1, contact was made with the fire department prior to submission. They considered the installation of safety sprinklers and fire hydrants to be acceptable. The council's highway officer, however, considers the access unsuitable despite the possible installation of sprinklers and hydrants, particularly given its impact on pedestrian and highway safety. In terms of reason 2, the applicants state that they meet the standard London Plan and national standards. The standard quoted by the applicant is for a 2-storey 4-person. The room sizes within the dwelling your officers consider are suitable for 5 persons, and they're of a size which is suitable for a 5-person, and therefore the calculations have been made on that basis. In terms of reason 3, they say that they've approached adjoining site owners who are not interested in selling the site. Whilst that's accepted, the density of the development is well below the London Plan minimum density, and therefore the site is considered to be underutilised, and this is particularly relevant in the housing zone where we should be making efficient use of the site given its location within the housing zone and within accessible locations. In relation to that particular reason, I would like to add London Plan Policy 3.4 to the reason for refusal, in addition to the other policies that are quoted. So, reason 3. On reason 3.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harani. Ms. Julie Clark. Hi, good evening. Please come forward and I'll talk you through what the process. You're allowed 5 minutes.
Do I sit or stand?
Yeah, of course you sit down, please. Make yourself comfortable. You're allowed 5 minutes of speaking time, and I do need to constrain you to that 5 minutes. And because it's all on YouTube, it's important we use the microphones, otherwise what you say isn't captured. In front of you is a microphone. You'll see a round disc button in front of it. That's a toggle on and off. You'll see a light come on and you'll know when it's live. When that happens, you can carry on and present your petition to us. Okay? So, at your own convenience. Thank you.
Okay, good evening everybody. I'm here to support the petitioners and also the residents of Sandow Crescent and Nestles Avenue. We've heard all the reasons that it's been recommended for refusal. I can't talk about the actual turning circles within the site, but our main concern is how vehicles are actually going to get into the site in the first place. As you can see, it's a very narrow alleyway. The actual entrance into the crescent itself is 4.6 metres wide, but this does reduce when people park on the left-hand side. So for them to be able to actually drive in to Sandow Crescent and then be able to negotiate the turn into the alleyway there, it's really tight. I can vouch for that, for the fact that we've replaced numerous walls and fences, as of my neighbours either side. And as you can see, I didn't know if you could see from the photo, but my actual neighbour on the right-hand side has given up now, and he's just put a temporary barrier to stop people driving over his land. That isn't in the photo there, but he's now actually got a small fenced area. Otherwise, that's the only way they can negotiate that turn to get in, is by driving over his property. Obviously, Mr. Khan now wants to make sure that doesn't carry on happening. How long that will stand up, I don't know. It's been knocked down already once, and he's resurrected it. And as I say, it's quite flimsy, so that doesn't surprise me. Our main concerns were emergency vehicles not being able to get down to the access road if there is a fire. I mean, obviously for us, we're backing onto these properties. If there is a fire, we're worried that it would easily spread. I mean, it's not only the people that are in the houses there. I know there was said that they could have sprinklers, but is that actually in the plans? Are there going to be sprinklers for the houses? We're not sure, so we don't know. And also the collection of rubbish, the refuse collection. At the moment, we all put our bags at the end of the road, so we put our bags in the corner of Nestles Avenue and Sandale Crescent. And we understand there's going to be a bin store, which is going to be more or less down the end of the access road and to the left. But there's no way you could actually get the truck down there. We did ask, and we did write in to say, would it be possible for them to get a smaller vehicle? But we didn't hear back from the council itself to say whether that's a possibility or not. And we were led to understand there would be a charge if that was the case, for the residents who are actually going to be at the back of there. So that, again, we have a rodent problem, like most people. And the idea of having sort of a bin store that can't be emptied just didn't seem satisfactory to us either. The safety as well, although at the moment it is used as an industrial site, most of the companies that are in there obviously operate during the day. At night time it's very quiet. The demographics have changed greatly for the people that are around there. We've now got a number of small children that like to play out in the evenings. The worry is they can't be seen until somebody's actually entered into the alleyway there. So that's a real concern for the neighbours, for their children. I think that just about covers it all, other than what was said at the beginning. I mean, obviously, our main concern is, as I say, emergency vehicles being able to access the site, pedestrian safety, and parking, which is a huge problem down such a small crescent. At the moment, we do have people that actually lease garages and rent garages there. They're then going to have to try and park onto the main and surrounding roads, which I think is going to be extremely difficult.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Clark. That's great. Before you leave, colleagues, any questions at all, clarification? I have one. Can you just clarify your bin collection for those properties that presently exist in Sandale Crescent?
Sure. So we leave our plastic bags.
Sorry, can you just use the microphone? No, it's all right.
We leave our plastic bags at the corner of Nestles Avenue and Sandale Crescent because the refuse truck can't get in to the Crescent because there's parking on one side, which is lined parking, and he's unable then to be able to get into the Crescent. So we leave them there. He can then stop in Nestles Avenue and he picks up the bags from there.
Right, so there's no bin collection down your present road. You
No.
all go to the end of the road.
We all go to the end of the road.
And this would then have to walk even further.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's most helpful.
Thank you.
Any others? Nothing. Thank you very much. Invite you to return to your seat. The applicant or agent, Mr. Phil Kerwin, present, or a Mr. Murphy? Neither. Not a problem. No ward councillors to speak. Sorry? Yeah, I know you are, Councillor Kashid. I wondered if Councillor Garner and Jarjusi were, but no, they're not. Okay. Colleagues, we've heard from the petitioner, we've also heard in the presentation, the issues around access. There is a disagreement between the applicant, who says it's suitable for the London Fire Brigade, he's been assured that, whereas we've heard from our own officers that it fails to meet the London Fire Brigade's own published standards in terms of width, concerns around pedestrian access and safety, particularly young children that could be in the street, difficulty in turning into it, so it's not only the turning within the site, it's actual access into the site, and the issue around the difficulty of refuse collection. The fact that the garages are presently being used for residents for parking in, and that won't be available, is something that's outside of our consideration. We can't take that into account, unfortunately. We can take the others, but that bit I'm set aside. What we can consider, though, is the impact of parking of the new residents. However, the plans show that the parking spaces are sufficient, is my belief. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. You wish to come in?
Come back. Just, if I could just comment on one point the petitioner made to the refuse vehicles. On the second line of refusal, reason 1, we've put the track is insufficiently wide for access by larger vehicles, including, and I'd like to add refuse and emergency vehicles. I think that would better cover, because there is clearly an issue with refuse vehicles here, and I think it would help to explicitly include it in the refusal reason.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Colleagues. Councillor Kashid.
Chair, it's a very good report by the officers. It covers all the points which the local residents have got on this site. And after a long time, I've seen a very good report from the planning officers on this site. And the officers have covered all the relevant reasons for refusal. The site, as the petitioners have said, is a very narrow road, and the refuse collection and the other emergency services will not be able to get in there. So, therefore, unless anybody else have got any burning desire on this one, move the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kashid. Do I have a second? Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't go through all the reasons. They're well documented in the report, and your own assessment of it at the beginning certainly outlined the reasons for refusal, so I'm quite prepared to second that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Then, show of hands, please, on that proposal. That's unanimous. That application is refused. Okay? Thank you. Turn now, please, to agenda item 7, the garage site, the rear of 85 and 87 Manor Way.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to a site located at the rear of 83-85 Manor Way, which comprises of a small garage court of 3 garages and 9 parking spaces. The proposal is for the erection of 3 two-storey, 2-bedroom dwellings. The application is the subject of 3 letters and a petition, and the details of the consultation replies are set out on pages 35 to 38 of the agenda. The main issues for members to consider are highways and parking, and the impact on adjoining occupiers. Members will note from the planning history section within the report that permission has been previously granted for the development of 2 two-storey, 2-bedroom dwellings on the site. Turning to the highways and parking issues, the previous planning permission granted for the development of the site, which is still extant and thus able to be implemented, accepted the loss of the turning area, parking spaces and garages that currently exist on the site. The proposed development would provide 2 parking spaces per unit, which accords with the Council's parking standards and is not considered to result in an increase in parking stress in the locality. Thus, subject to the applicant entering into a legal agreement regarding the stopping up of the existing turning area, the proposal is acceptable in this regard. In terms of the impact on adjoining occupiers, the Council's adopted supplementary planning document, Residential Layout, recommends where a 2 or more storey building abuts a property or its garden, adequate distance should be maintained to overcome possible over-domination, and 15 metres is the minimum acceptable distance recommended within that document. The proposed residential units will be located in excess of 15 metres from the adjacent properties at 83-85 Manor Way, and no windows are proposed in the flank elevations. The proposal is thus considered acceptable in terms of its impact in this regard. Proposed development would be located 15.3 metres from the properties to the west on the opposite side of Manor Way. Planning consent previously granted on the site approved a layout similar to that proposed with a separation distance of 15.8 metres. The reduction of this distance by 0.5 metres is not considered to result in a significant impact on the occupiers of the properties opposite the site, such that it would warrant a recommendation for refusal. Overall, the scheme is therefore not considered to result in any significant loss of amenity to neighbouring properties, such that a refusal could be justified. In conclusion, the proposed dwellings would meet all relevant council standards in terms of car parking, unit size and amenity space provision, and the impact on neighbouring properties is considered acceptable. The application is thus recommended for approval. If I could just go through the plans. It's the application site. That's as existing. The area just to the front, unfortunately my pointer's not working, but the white area to the front is the garage court, and then you've got the parking area to the rear there. The proposed layout, which shows the parking, tandem parking for the dwellings, and then the floor plans. Again, the design of the properties is considered acceptable. And this is just showing the application or the development in relation to the properties on Manor Way, which are sited to the front at the top. And that's the site as it currently is. Those are the dwellings opposite the site. The site does involve, or the development does involve the loss of 2 trees on the site. One of these is this one, which are mature trees, but they are to be replaced, and that's covered by the landscaping condition. And that's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Mr. Ronnie. Maria Ale, my apologies if I mispronounced your name. If you'd like to come forward again, if somebody would kindly assist and remove the chair for you, that'd be great. And hopefully you're able to reach the microphone. If not, we can reposition it. Now, it's the same as beforehand, which is 5 minutes speaking time. Okay. The button in the centre on the base of the microphone is a toggle on and toggle off button. So when you press that, the light will come on, and that means the microphone is live. And you have 5 minutes to present your petition to us, okay? So whenever you're ready, if you turn your microphone on and then start, we will start the timing. Okay, thank you very much. It's okay. We understand it can be nerve-wracking, but please just treat this as a conversation with us. That's all it is, and you just need to just explain to us what your feelings are about this development. So no pressure, really isn't. You just be relaxed and take your time, okay?
It's just when somebody puts a time reference in something, it's like
I know.
exam condition again.
I know. I'm sorry that I have to do that, but I do have to do that to be fair to everybody, okay? So when you're ready.
Okay, so the proposal for 3 houses into 2-story would be, for the area it would be considered overcrowded. Why it is because the area, covered area of 40 square meter per house, and that's the whole covered area, should be considered actually by national standards less for living sizes, living standards, and within those houses it will be overcrowding, and it does not go with the area either. When you add those 3 houses, it certainly becomes, the area would look overcrowded. There will certainly be a parking problem, because existing we have 2 people who are very severely disabled, and they use, one lady uses a dial-a-ride on a regular basis, which they will not be able to turn around. Actually, it can go and it can't turn around. Same for the refuse truck. And again, fire engine, there'll be all sorts of problems, and we even had an air ambulance at one occasion, and there will be a huge implication on emergency services to avail that area once these houses are made, and then they have their own cars as well. Because what's to stop, if there are 4 occupants in one per house, what's to stop them from having 4 cars per house? There is, allocation for 1 car per house, but it's not sufficient for the area, and it's not realistic. Again, the site that you see in the pictures and the pictures that the drawings that they have made in the plan, they do not match. They look good. The sizing of the rooms and the distance from the houses and the existing houses and the gardens that they have done, it looks good on the paper, but realistically it will be severe overlooking and invasion of privacy. And especially for, there is absolutely no consideration for the disabled residents and elderly, which actually quite a few in that area. There are actually 4 very elderly people. My neighbor, who lives in 85 Manor Way, when they will be building behind her, my house and her house, and we will not be able to cope with noise. We will not be able to, it's going to have a direct implication on our health, and those severely disabled ladies who live on the adjacent side of the proposed property, their health is going to be severely, both physical and mental health will be affected by this. And are they expected at that time that when they are doing the construction vehicle will be there, then what will happen to the residents parking? If they are at present, all of them are using the existing area to turn around their cars. Now, since they have stopped those use of those garage space for parking space, now most of the people, they park on the road, and there are 2 schools at both end of Manor Way, one school at the beginning and one school across the Manor Way, and most of the parents, they come and they park there in the morning and in the afternoon, and it will be a huge danger to the children passing there, the children using the park, which is regularly in use of children after school. It will be. We're looking at an accident, here to happen, and we can't do that. So there are safety issues there. And again, traffic. When the traffic,
I need to draw you to a close, but you have covered an awful lot of ground. Okay, and I have taken notes.
I did not even come to the trees. Those trees are 100 years old. Why?
I'm sorry. You've included them. No, we've heard the comment, but I can't allow you to carry on any further. I must stop you there. Yes. Colleagues, are there any questions at all, Ms. Ali, regarding her petition? No. Thank you very much. I invite you to return to the gallery area, and I will see if if we have either the applicant, Mr. Pareja, or the agent, Mr. Carroll, wishing to speak. Mr. Carroll, please, if you'd like to come forward. If you have 5 minutes speaking time, 4 on the amber and 1 on the red, and commence with the toggle on, toggle off of the microphone. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Committee. Thanks very much for letting us speak on this application. My name is Dave Carroll. I'm a Chartered Town Planner. Just in summary, the site is poor quality brownfield land. It was historically used for parking, but not every parking or garage space can be kept forever, and there's no policy protection on it. The applicant is making best use of the land, assisting in meeting Hillingdon's housing targets, at the same time meeting council standards set out in London Plan and the local development plan, which you've already heard about from Mr. Harani. Just to cover some of the issues raised by the objector about the overcrowding. As I said, we meet London Plan standards for the houses. We meet Hillingdon's local standards in terms of providing 60 to 70 square metres in the rear gardens, as well as generous front gardens. You've heard that parking been raised as a potential problem. Each site will have 2 parking spaces and not 1, I think, as the objector said. And your highways engineer has deemed that perfectly acceptable in terms of turning the vehicles and in terms of any particular problems about access. In terms of construction, obviously the site construction is always a problem, but the site will be tinned up and made safe. We don't believe there's any significant traffic safety issues that will arise from construction or from the use of those dwellings for residential use. In conclusion, I hope I'll get under the 5 minutes therefore, there's no loss of amenity to adjoining occupiers. We meet the council standards on car parking, on dwelling size and amenity space. We meet all other policies on trees and landscaping, wheelchair access. On trees and landscaping, we will have 3 replacement trees for the 2 that are lost. The 2 that were lost were granted on previous application. We meet policies on wheelchair access, on flooding, sustainable urban drainage, energy, materials, and as I say, I don't think there's any significant impact on neighbours. The site's recommended for approval, is supported by planning, highways, landscape, tree and environmental officers. Development is sustainable. Your officer recommendation carries significant weight, as you know, and I urge the committee to approve the application before you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Colleagues, any questions at all? I have one, if I may, Mr. Carroll. I believe you said you were a Chartered Town Planner. What consideration did you give to footway access to the park as you're proposing to build up to the road line, removing footway? Okay, accepting the fact that there's a drop curb there, would you not accept the fact that ordinarily somebody might walk down the road and then walk down the pavement and then carry on along the drop curb rather than walk into the middle of the road to be able to access the park? Would you not consider that to be a normal route?
I think that most people would get the gate is clearly on the other side, so you tend to go on the pavement side where the gate is.
Okay, thank you very much. Asked and answered. If there are no other questions, I invite you to return to your seat. Thank you. Colleagues, we've heard from the petitioners and also from the agent. Some points have been made, again, which I must explain that we can't take into consideration. For example, construction impacts. They are matters that, as a planning committee, we can't refuse an application because there might be noise and disturbance during the course of building. It's not what is called a material planning consideration. They're quite confined, the things that we're allowed to consider. And construction impacts, I can't. With regards to overlooking and noise and disturbance and amenity, we have a number of standards published. Okay, and these standards are all about separation distances to prevent overlooking and to prevent overshadowing. And we are duty bound to observe those standards. And if an application complies with those standards, we can't then refuse it on the grounds that, although we have a standard and it meets it, we believe that this should be held to a higher regard. You're right. Thank you very much. I'm going to pause there because I do know that Councillor Graham wishes to speak, and I have overlooked that point, so I'll invite you to come forward and have your 3 minutes, Councillor Graham. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Chair, Committee. I'm Councillor Ray Graham, Uxbridge North Ward, for the record. You've heard the lead petitioner, Mrs. Ali, on behalf of the 31 local petitioners and the principal concerns and objections that they've expressed. I'm aware of the extant permission agreed in December 2014 for the erection of 2 semi-detached houses on this site, and what issues can now be treated in accordance with relevant planning policies and plans, etc. I do know that the lead petitioner was concerned about overlooking and impact from the new residential units, and I think, Chairman, you've covered some of that just now. Just to reiterate, there are going to be no windows on the flank elevation, and what's more, the facing north in future, there will be no additional doors, windows or openings allowed. So that's useful to record. The application before you is for 3 terraced 2-bedroom dwellings, which in size and style are said to meet all the relevant council standards. The petitioners disagree with that. We know that there are plans and policies which we have to consider, so I'll make no further comment on that, other than to say I support the fact that the petitioners are concerned that this could be overdevelopment of this particular area. However, having visited the site, there are issues that still need to be fully addressed and considered by this committee tonight, and these are, in my opinion, firstly, the highway works. Parking and safety issues apply. There are, as we know, 6 off-road car parking spaces which are to be provided, split north and south for the proposed development, and it's important, following the stopping up order, if you understand what that is, for it to be confirmed that the resultant wide crossovers for vehicular access to the site and public highway should be used by residents, and I'd like this to be commented upon, to complete 3-point turns, given that it is otherwise very difficult at the end of that sort of so-called cul-de-sac area due to the turning area, especially for, as was mentioned by the petitioner, 2 disabled drivers who live close by. In fact, they live immediately opposite and adjacent to the site. You mentioned with the applicant's agent access to the park. I hope note will be made of that. The other point, second point I wanted to make, was tree protection and retention. Tree protection measures are mentioned in the report.
Councillor, I must draw you to a close there. I'm sorry. Your 3 minutes has expired. Okay.
Really?
It is timed. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to go on about protection of two
Thank you very
trees
much.
which are there.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. No, they can't, sir. As I said right at the beginning, although this is a public meeting, there are no public speaking rights. The only persons that can address us are the petitioners. So, therefore, you cannot, sir, and if you persist in doing that, the only recourse we have is to close the meeting temporarily. Thank you very much. That would be of assistance. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, colleagues. My apologies to Councillor Graham for overlooking the fact that he wished to speak, and I had already started on another matters. And one of the things I was explaining are our standards, and there are council standards, and we will check. I will go through some of the issues you talked about regarding the overcrowding and the living standards, overlooking, and those sorts of issues, the inaccuracy of the plans. I picked out the issues of parking, and I'll ask for the highways officer. I'm interested in how this application differs from the previous ones. Did the previous ones remove what would be considered to be the natural continuation of the footway to allow access to the park from both sides of the road? If that is the case, then our hands begin to be quite severely tied. If not, if this is a difference, then I think that is a consideration that the committee should have. So I will be looking for some clarification on that one. So can we start, though, with overcrowding living standards, please, Mr. Harani, and explain again what the standards are and how this one meets or doesn't meet those applications.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. In terms of the size of the dwellings, this is set out in the London plan, and also there are national standards which are basically the same standards as the London plan. The proposed development provides approximately just under 80 square metres, and the London plan requirement for the development is 79 square metres, so this meets the standard in terms of the internal floor areas. In terms of amenity space, the council has a set standard which is for 2 and 3 bedroom properties is 60 square metres, and again 2 of the properties are provided with 60 and 1 of the properties has 70 square metres, so again those standards are met.
Thank you. So in summary, we're saying that in terms of the design of the building, the living standards are compliant with our standards, compliant with the London plan, therefore overcrowding is not an issue. Thank you very much. Can you comment about the accuracy or inaccuracy of the plans? The petitioner has mentioned these are not representative of the actual dimensions of the site.
Without sort of measuring them on site, I think we have to rely on the accuracy. I did check some of the distances in relation to the OS maps that we have ourselves, and they show that the distances are correct.
Thank you. And if, and it's a big if, read nothing into it, please, if planning permission were granted, the developer would have to build according to the accuracy of the plans presented. Is that correct? That's
correct. If it was found that the site was smaller or bigger, then they would need to resubmit to amend any of the sizes that are being proposed.
Thank you. And finally, regarding overlooking, there was a concern about impact on elderly neighbours, overlooking or overshadowing. Do you have any comment on that, please?
Yeah, again, we had Councillor, I think Graham mentioned it, there are no windows in the side elevations of the building which would overlook the nearest properties, which are 83 and 85 Manor Way. Those separation distances amount to just under 16 metres, which meets the council standard of 15 metres. So again, there's no issues in relation to overshadowing and overlooking.
Thank you very much. Do you have access to the plans that were approved back in 2011, then 2014? To see whether or not
have a layout plan, yeah.
Does it show whether or not the development extended up to the roadway as opposed to the pavement?
Sorry, if I can.
Yes, Chairman, it does.
It doesn't.
The two are the same.
The two are the same.
Yes.
So we have an approval that effectively removes that pavement already. So there's nothing new in this application.
Yeah, the 2011-2014 didn't introduce a section of pavement.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason for asking this is that the planning committee is bound by past decisions. It's present, it carries, it's a material planning consideration and carries very, very considerable weight. And the mere fact that development could today start for two houses on that plot of land that would remove the footway means that we can't now consider that removal of the footway. That's already been decided previously. And that is something that will bear quite heavily on us, along with our standards. But let me now open it up to colleagues for questions. I'm really sorry. I can't allow further questions. Otherwise, meetings would become unmanageable. And I'm sorry for that, because I know that you have a genuine concern and would wish it to be heard. I can't. Councillor Morse.
Can I have some clarity on how the parking works? I assume the two people on the left are for the first house, and we're actually allocating parking in pairs of two, because I'm not quite clear how you come in and out of these parking locations.
Certainly. Mr. Tilley.
The drawings that I have seen show tandem parking, so there would be one vehicle towards the front, one vehicle to the rear. You have to the north on the Uxbridge side, you have one line of tandem parking. On the other side, you've got two lines of tandem parking, making provision for 6 vehicles, as shown actually. Thank you. If I can just clarify, the parking is allocated in terms of the numbers that they've been given on the plan. Obviously the parking on that side of the development is allocated to that dwelling. The one next to the third dwelling, as it were, is allocated to that dwelling, and the one furthest away is the centre.
Okay, Councillor Morse.
Yeah, it's just I've never seen parking arranged like this, because it would mean that these two cars, if somebody ever crossed over, a neighbour actually put his car, presumably we have no control over that, but it is possible there could be some disputes on how the parking is proceeding.
Yes, but that would be the same situation with any crossover. If any crossover is blocked, then you wouldn't be able to use it.
Mr. Roger?
It might help on this particular issue if there was an additional condition that made it absolutely clear that the parking allocation has to be adhered to and retained for the lifetime of the development proposal. So, I mean, it is covered to an extent by Condition 2, but if there was a bespoke planning condition, it could make it even clearer that, because what we wouldn't want is any of those parking spaces sold off to a different unit, or that are not clearly allocated as per the plan.
Okay, a consideration. Any other questions at all? Clarification. Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just establish that the actual drop curb crossover will still belong to the London Borough of Hillingdon, so it becomes roadway, it becomes pavement effectively, and therefore if anybody wanted to use it in order to do a 3-point turn, they could use it.
We do have a legal agreement which could cover that issue, I think. The heads of terms talk about a agreement which is required for a stopping up order for the highway works, but we could include within that it remains open plan and level, so that it is usable as a turning area as such.
Councillor Yarrow?
I mean, it was one of the points that was made by the petitioner, that turning is going to be difficult. I mean, even getting a disabled bus down there, it's going to have to turn round to come back out again. And if they can't get onto any other space, than just the road, they're going to have a hell of a job to turn around. If they just pull into that dropped curb and then reverse out, and they may have to pull into it again, but they can turn the vehicle around. But I just wondered where we stand legally on that, in that nobody should be parking on the dropped curb. Cars should not be protruding onto that dropped curb, because does it belong to the house or does it belong to the council?
I think what we could do, so if I refer to the plan, you'll see 3 square green areas which are providing the minimum sort of 25% of soft landscaping in the front garden. So the bit in front of those that's not the 3 front parking bays, what could be doing through the stopping up order is requiring that entire area to be kept free of obstruction, so that what we do is prevent the householders being able to put up any picket fence or do anything that effectively encloses that area, therefore stopping, in effect, anybody who wished to driving over it if they had to do a manoeuvre at the end of the cul-de-sac. I know, because I have discussed this with the highway engineer, that we wouldn't be able to confirm it's necessarily resulting in a kind of strictly compliant turning circle, but it would obviously make a difference if that extra roughly 2.5 metres is available. So I think there is a way of doing that. There's one other thing I was going to mention. In looking at the planning history, back in 2011, the then Central and South Committee did add a construction management condition, and I only mention it because I think it touches on some of the issues raised by the petitioner about her concerns about construction impacts. So that we did use it. We don't use it much anymore on non-major applications. We did used to have a planning condition that required details of how a development would be built, where the construction huts would go, where the construction vehicles would park, and that kind of thing. And obviously this site is next to the access to a council park, so we wouldn't want that to be blocked. So I think there could be grounds to consider that additional condition, that I know members are familiar with the more detailed wording of that condition. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. But just for completeness, the question was about the footway and whether it remained in the ownership of the local authority. My understanding is that this is now no longer in the ownership of the local authority. This site is privately owned and being privately developed, so there is no footway.
Right up to the road is now private land.
With the Section 247 stopping up order, that's correct. It would no longer be a highway, but with this Section 278 that the applicant is also required to be entered into, we have some scope to agree how that would look. So as the head of planning has said, to keep it free of any obstructions.
Fine. Okay. I would detect a way forward if this were to be approved, that we could delegate to the head of planning to ensure that the head of terms included sufficient measures to enable those forecourt areas up to the green planting to be able to be used as turning for the general public. Okay. Is that all right?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be kind of marked out as turning for the public, but we'd be able to block any obstruction, so in theory it could be used. You will see occasionally on cul-de-sacs that there are people manoeuvring on private driveways. That isn't as uncommon as it might sound, so effectively you'd be creating that kind of situation.
Agreed, but it's about also creating the right for a member of the public to do that, as opposed to requiring them to keep it clear and then taking action for trespass on their land. It's whether or not we can secure access to that part to enable that to happen, and for that would be a legal and planning matter.
It's not something that I could perhaps advise on now, but if there is delegated authority, I can carry out the necessary research outside of committee.
I think we should try. It's not going to affect tonight, but I mean we should make the effort to do our best to see if we can get a turning circle. Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any other issues? Right, let's try and pull this together, particularly for members of the public who have shown an interest in coming here. And there is clearly opposition from the local community about this development. As a committee, though, our hands are, to a great extent, tied by past decisions and by our policies. So although you've made persuasive argument, there is nothing that has arisen that is new that enables us in any way to undo a past decision or to override our existing policies. And so, in many ways, we are almost duty-bound to come to what is going to be an inevitable decision, I would think. The recommendation here is for approval, and there has been suggestions that we amend any conditions in a couple of ways. Firstly, we would add the construction management condition, which will enable us to better control the way a property is built to minimise any impact on the community, and particularly blocking off the access to the park or making it dangerous for families and young people to access the park, and we can do that. We would also be looking and delegating, if members were so minded to agree, to the head of planning, the head of terms to be amended to establish a clear area to the front of the three premises up to the soft landscaping to enable that to be used as a general returning area, accepting the fact that the development presently removes what would have been considered to have been a drop curb and highway land that would have been used for that purpose. But our hands are tied by the past decision as well. Colleagues, I need some assistance here in moving this forwards, please. Councillor Yarrow?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think we have any alternative. Our hands are tied by the past, and it would look very silly if we tried to do something completely different. So I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. That is subject to the additions of the condition on construction, the parking allocations, and the legal head of terms around the forecourt management. Councillor Kashid?
Yeah, with all that, Chair, I'll second the...
Thank you very much. Show of hands, please. That is unanimous. Ladies and gentlemen, the decision has been to permit planning, and I hope I have explained the reasons of why we have arrived at that decision, even though you may not completely agree with them, and I understand that. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 8, please. King's Arms Court, 109 Cold Harbour Lane, Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman. Very short presentation. This is an application for a change of use of part of the ground floor retail unit, which is still under construction at the moment, to a takeaway use. The site is located within Hayes Town Centre, but the loss of part of the retail use is considered acceptable, doesn't result in an over-concentration of such uses, and the impact on the adjoining occupiers is considered acceptable, including the impact on the occupiers of the new flats within the development. The flue is going to be mostly internal, other than a 1 metre venting out above the roof element. So we consider that the application is acceptable. You'll see from the plans that it's very difficult to show where it is at the moment because it was originally an empty site. You'll see from the photograph that it's very difficult to show where it is as well. It was the King's Arms public house previously, which is what's shown on there. It was granted permission for a redevelopment, a major site application. This is the design of the new development. The retail unit is located on the ground floor there, and this is the basement, and this is the retail element that's being changed. The sort of on the ground floor you'll see clear glazing, and that is a retail element. And where you see I can show you on this plan, where you see the division here, this element here that's been changed into a retail. So this whole area here retained as a retail use. So it's a minimal loss in the retail floor space, and we think that's acceptable in this location. That's the site. Unfortunately, I can't show you much more than that. It is located virtually at the junction there, the unit in question, but the proposal is considered acceptable. We have been requested by the applicants to just clarify condition 6, which relates to deliveries and servicing of the unit. They kind of, I guess, are slightly frightened by the fact that may preclude deliveries from the site of pizzas. That isn't the intention of that condition. The intention is to restrict deliveries to the site between those hours, and it's just to clarify that it is for that reason that the condition is there, and so just to sort of amend the wording to be delegated to the head of planning so that it clarifies that it is deliveries to the site. The hours of deliveries don't change, the days of deliveries don't change. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rani. Colleagues, any questions, any thoughts? Councillor Money?
I think it's quite straightforward. I don't think we're going to lose any retail space. I move the officer's approval decision.
One, because the works have been done. That's it. It's a sort of office stroke lecture building to the rear, so there's no residential, no student accommodation affected. So it's considered to be acceptable, well within the site, no impact on the green belt. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Yarrow?
Move the officer's recommendations, Chairman.
Councillor Alfme-Wallana? Thank you very much. Show of hands, please. Everybody, good. Thank you. Tomorrow Lounge, item 10. Thank you, Mr. Rani. Anybody take this forward, or any questions or issues? Councillor Yarrow?
Well, we've seen this in front of us before. I don't think there's anything that we can do about it. There doesn't appear to be any problems from neighbours, so I think we'll go along with the officer's recommendation to approve.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second? Councillor Kashif, thank you. Show of hands, please, on that one. That's everybody. Thank you. Number 1, DeSalis Road, item 11.
Sorry, this is an application for the conversion of the property to 2 two-bed self-contained flats. The flats in themselves meet the council's and the London Plan standards. The issue really is the parking provision. The requirement is minimum 2 spaces, and they cannot provide any parking on site. The only parking that is shown on the plans overhangs the footway and therefore is considered unacceptable, and for that reason we're saying that it's unacceptable. If I can just show you the plans, it's probably The plans do actually show the parking to be across the footway, and if I go to the photographs, you'll see an illustration of how that works. These are the surrounding areas, and we did get a parking survey or a parking statement from the applicants, which showed that there was some capacity, but not in DeSalis Road or within close proximity of this site, so residents would have to go some distance to park their cars from this site. And this photograph illustrates that the cars would overhang the footway, which this car that's parked in the application site is doing at the current time illegally. So it totally obstructs the footway, and residents would have to, or pedestrians would have to manoeuvre around that car to use the footpath. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I mean, whilst we're pleased to see development going on in the borough and welcome additional properties, we're also mindful that they need to provide adequate parking, and we not long back in council restated our commitment to parking standards. So, Councillor Akhmi-Vellana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a very straightforward refusal, so I'll go with the officer's recommendations to refuse the application.
Councillor Chapman. Thank you very much. Show of hands then, please, on this one. Everybody, thank you. Number 12, 9 Ryfield Avenue.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a new dwelling attached to the existing detached dwelling. The property is a junction or corner location, junction of Ryfield Avenue, and it's basically totally infilling the space to the side of the dwelling. It projects forward of the return building line, and these are issues that are covered in the council's supplementary planning document on residential layouts, which says that they should be avoided. It is an issue that is considered quite often at committee and by officers. It is an issue that we are winning considerable appeals on as well, in terms of infilling the space, in terms of the impact on the character of the road and the dwellings themselves. So for that reason it's recommended for refusal. Again, there's issues in relation to the parking, and there's issues in relation to the size of the bedrooms that's being provided. One of the bedrooms is under 4 square metres, so it's totally below the minimum requirement that would be required. I would say that the summary at the front of the report should cover all of those issues. It does cover the issue relating to the siting and the spacing of the development, but does omit the issues in relation to the size of the bedrooms and the parking, and it should cover those issues and say that it's unacceptable for that reason as well. So if I could have that recorded in the minutes. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Colleagues? Councillor Chandama?
Yeah, I think that's with the comments that Mr. Hirani just made. I think we go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Kashid. Show of hands, please. Everybody. Thank you very much. 13. Rear of 1 to 3 Column Mill Road.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a backland site which is an application for a 2-bed detached bungalow. We consider that the siting of the development is cramped, and this results in inadequate separation distances between the proposed dwelling and the existing properties at 2 and 3 Column Mill Road. They're very close, and again we've got issues in relation to parking. They do show 2 garages to be retained, but both of the garages are undersized and not usable. So for that reason, that's why it's there. And because of its constrained nature, the development would result in habitable room windows which look very close to the boundaries, and therefore would be looking at a fence at a distance of 3 metres or so, which wouldn't be a particularly good outlook. So that's another reason for refusal. The final reason relates to the cramped nature of the development, and it does say that it closes an important gap characteristic in the area. Members will have noted that it's not really an important gap in the area, so I think we should remove that element of it and just say that it would be visually at odds with the predominant character and appearance, and remove the scale of the building as well, because the backland nature, we do say in our policies that if we do allow backland development, it should be at a smaller scale than the surrounding development. So for that reason, we should remove that element of it as well. So with that amendment to the condition or reason 4, it is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morse?
Yes, to breach a statement of our policies, so I move that we support officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Money? Thank you very much. Show of hands, please, on this one. Everybody. Thank you. Now move to the last. City Flower Traders. Agenda item 14.
Yeah. This is an existing building on the site, and again, you want to use part of it as basically a community use. It was previously a retail use. Part of it is being retailed. Sorry, that was previous plans. Part of it is still being retained for that use, and I think it's a good use of the site. It's a small building or small floor space, so you wouldn't be able to fit a large number of people in there, so the impact on the occupiers of the residential moorings there, there wouldn't be a major impact there. If I can just show you the photograph, it is the left-hand side as I look at it of the building which is being used for this purpose. The rest of it remains in its current use. There is an amendment in the addendum sheet proposed for condition 5, which covers the fact that for 6 occasions in the year the premises can be used up to 2,400 hours. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Harley. Colleagues?
Yeah, this is straightforward application.
Thank you. You're moving.
Recommendation.
Subject to the change put forward. Thank you. Councillor Money, seconded. Lovely. Thank you very much. Show of hands, please, on that one. Well done, colleagues. That's everybody. We are complete for the evening. Thank you.